And I'm here on the Andrew Burnett Show with Candy O'Terry and Jace Valeras of Country Music Success Stories. How are y'all doing?
We're great. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, it's an honor. So tell us a little bit about where Country Music Success Stories actually came from.
Well, Jacy and I have known each other for a couple of years, Andrew, and she invited me down to Nashville to do a 4-part series for another podcast that I do and have done for years called The Story Behind Her Success. And when we were recording those 4 shows, we quickly realized there were so many stories to be told here in Nashville. So we decided to put together a podcast specific to country music success stories, and we are having so much fun.
We really are.
So who would you say have been some of your favorite guests so far on the show that really stick out to you, that would be memorable or funny or whatever the case may be? What was your most memorable guest so far? Let's start there.
I think they all have something memorable. It's really interesting because a lot of them have been people that we maybe have met before in the past, or we know a lot about their stories. But when you sit down and you hear them speak about their experiences, you're always learning something. And so we walk away from every single experience feeling like it was the most memorable hour of our lives. I think Naomi Judd, for me, she has been my lifelong idol. She's the reason I got into country music. The Judds were, my favorite singers when I was growing up. So having the opportunity to sit in a room and listen to her tell her life story was absolutely incredible. What about you?
Well, I think the niche that we have found, Andrew, that works for us every single time and makes every interview so memorable is that we are in their space. They're not coming to our space. We're going to their home. As recently as an hour ago, we just sat in the home of T.G. Shepherd and at his dining room table to talk about his incredible 40-plus year career. And it's his home. It's his space. We're being welcomed in. Naomi invited us onto her 500-acre compound. Jeannie Seeley served us tea on her back porch overlooking the Cumberland River. Kent Blasey had us in his beautiful mid-century home overlooking the city of Nashville with his songwriting journals right there on his table. So everything becomes very personal, very unique, and very special, for sure.
So Candy, we're going to start with you. Where did your career in radio really come from?
Oh boy. Well, I am a tried and true radio girl, and I'm not embarrassed to tell you so. I love live local radio. I've been a singer all my life, but I became a single mom kind of unexpectedly. And it's very difficult to be a single mom and to be singing late at night in bars, And so I thought, wow, I've been singing these pop songs my whole life. Maybe I should get a job on a radio station. And so I started from the ground up. But I started on the #1 station in Boston. But I started, Andrew, off the air as the secretary to the program director. And it was a foot in the door for me just to get a full-time job in radio. I spent the next 25 years at the same station. The way I got on the air was we had a disc jockey with a terrible habit of falling asleep on the radio. And my boss said to me, I'm the secretary, he said, call him up and tell him if he falls asleep one more time, we're going to have to let him go. And this poor guy had 6 children, all under the age of 7. And by day, he was an exterminator. And by night, he was a disc jockey. And the poor guy just couldn't stay awake. Well, he got fired the next day for falling asleep. And my boss came over to my little cubicle and said, you're on tonight. And I had no idea who he was talking to because it couldn't be me. And it was me. And I was horrible. I made every mistake you can possibly make. Thank God I kept us on the air. At least I did that, right? Because I had my FCC license to broadcast. I did go to broadcasting school. But the long story short is just that I guess I had some talent that my boss heard, recognized, and mentored. And we all need a mentor. And I spent the next 25 years on the radio.
That is amazing. So, Jacy, where did your love for country music come from?
I know. How does a girl from Massachusetts get into country music, right? I grew up in Massachusetts. My parents did not listen to country music.
But she listened to me on the radio.
I did. We'll tell that story in a minute. I actually started listening to country music because of Leanne Rimes, who is my exact age, and she had just won a Grammy Award for the song Blue. And I started listening to her, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me. Then I learned about the Judds, and that really solidified the fact that I wanted to sing country music. And I started singing and started performing country music with a band. And one thing led to another. I eventually ended up in Nashville writing and singing. And I've been in Nashville for 11 years now. So I really have worked, I mean, more than half of my life in the country music arena. So, so it's ingrained in me.
So how did you two get connected? Let's talk a little bit about that story.
It's a fun story.
It's a fun
Go ahead, you tell
story.
it.
So one day, about 2 years ago, I got an email from this girl named Jacy Valeras, who I did not know. And it just, the subject was listened to you on the radio growing up or something like that, that caught my attention. And she was introducing herself to me as a singer-songwriter living in Nashville, but having grown up in a Boston suburb, listened to me on the air for many years, making me feel very old, by the way. And she said, I'd love to meet you someday, and I'd like to join your organization. I had been the co-founder of a networking organization called Boston Women in Media and Entertainment. So of course I welcomed her into the organization. Didn't matter if she lived in Nashville, we were happy to have her. And from the moment I met this beautiful woman, I knew we were destined to do something together. And we've worked together in one capacity or another ever since then. And I'm just so delighted to be partnering with her on this incredible adventure, Country Music Success Stories.
That is amazing. So what's coming up for Country Music Success Stories that you would like to share?
We have so many incredible guests coming up. We're doing, I think, 9 interviews this week. So we just did T.G. Shepherd today. We are talking with Steve Dorff, who is an incredible songwriter who wrote through the years for Kenny Rogers. We have Tony Brown, who is an award-winning producer. Colin Ray, who is an incredible country music success story. There are so many. Who am I forgetting?
No, honestly, my head is spinning because this is the long arm of Jacy Valeras. She knows everybody in Nashville. And, I feel like I bring my interviewing skills to the table, but I have Jacy to thank for all these incredible connections. Andrew, over the last 28 years, I've interviewed over 700 women from every walk of life. And because I've got a career in radio for as long as I had, I'm very used to the experience of either a short form, sudden, whoa, the artist is here, you got to ask them a few questions and you're live on the radio, or a long form interview where you have to prepare and know everything there is to know about that artist. So I feel like I've got those interview chops. And so for me to be able to sit down with these people, and I'll tell you what, I spent my career in adult contemporary pop radio. Country artists are so kind. They are so welcoming. They are so open. These people are allowing us into their homes to tell their stories. And I will say that we have come to a place recently where we feel like we're capturing country music history, because a couple of our stories most recently are from people who toured with, were dear friends with, and truly were mentored by the king of rock and roll,
Elvis Presley. Our guest this week is Larry Strickland, who was with J.D. Sumner in the Stamps for many years. He toured. He did over 200 shows with Elvis Presley. He's also the husband of Naomi Judd. So these stories really are coming from people who lived through some of the biggest moments in music history. And we feel so lucky to have the chance to talk with them and get their stories and share them with other people who may have never or will never have the opportunity to hear them in this format.
And when you think about it, Andrew, do the math. Elvis has been dead since 1977. These two men, Larry Strickland and today T.G. Shepherd, were young men when they met Elvis Presley. They're older gentlemen now, but we're capturing their stories about the king of rock and roll, what he was really like. And we're learning, not only was he generous about giving gifts to people that he loved, but he was a true mentor who took people under his wing. Pretty cool.
That is so amazing. We had TG Shepherd on the show not too long ago, and I'm telling you,
He
just
said to say hello.
just
I
the
did.
stories that he shares. I mean, let's not forget when he mentions Elvis's famous peanut butter and banana sandwich. I mean, that was just so cool to be able to hear him talk about the way he met Elvis at the skating rink and hearing those kinds of stories. And it amazes me. And Candy, I have a question for you. Okay, for
Sure.
upcoming interviewers like myself that are really trying to get into this interview skill, what are the top 5 questions that you usually ask a country music artist?
Well, I'm going to have you pay me $1 million for the answer to that question, Mr. Andrew. I'll tell you what my best advice to any interviewer is beyond the questions. The questions come from careful research. Careful research. One question that might work for TG Shepherd might not work for Crystal Gale, or might not work for Heidi Newfield, who we're going to talk to tomorrow. But here's something that will never let you down. And you're doing it already. So a star on your forehead. Be a good listener. So often interviewers have their list of questions on the table and they want to get from one to the other. Listen to what the person is saying, because sometimes the treasure is following their next story and taking that story down the path that they created, not going one by one down your list of interviews. That's my best piece of advice.
And that's one thing I try to do. I have a list of questions sitting in front of me, but I try to go with the flow of the conversation. Where does this
Yes.
conversation going to go to next? Because I'm more of a conversation type guy. I'm not one of those journalists 60 minutes where if you don't answer my question, you can get up and leave the show type deal. That's not me. I like to bask in what the artist is saying, because there's some really good advice and good stories that we all could learn from these people. Like, my goodness, I just wish I had an ounce of the kindness that TG Shepherd and Kelly Lang has, and the love that they're showing to the world. I mean, just the love story that they have and the things that they've shared. Man, I tell you, it's just enough to make you smile all day, and I'm sure there's been moments like that for y'all. What would be a memorable moment that sticks to the forefront of your mind in an interview that you've done so far?
Jacy?
A memorable moment. I
There have
think
been so many.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like, how do we choose? One thing that sticks with me a lot was when we got to talk with Jeannie Seeley and we were sitting on her back porch. She's a woman who really was such a pioneer for other women, especially on the Grand Ole Opry. She was the first female host of the Grand Ole Opry. I think she was the third woman to ever win a Grammy Award for female country vocalist. And just her telling her story about what it took for her to make that happen for herself. I just think, as a woman who has worked in country music for so long, that was really inspiring to me. And having mentors that I still look up to. I mean, all of the people that we've had the opportunity to sit with, I try to go into that room and learn something from them, not just for the interview or for the sake of our listeners, but I'm learning something, because when you're in the presence of people like that, how can you not? So listening to her talk about how she did that and taking that with me, and maybe someday I can use that, or we can use that kind of information from any of the guests we've talked to. I think Jeannie was probably one of my favorites. What about you?
Well, I'll tell you, when we interviewed Naomi Judd in their compound, 500-acre compound in Leapers Fork, and they have this beautiful studio that's located inside a barn on their property. And there we are, and there's a couch, and Larry Strickland, Naomi's husband, was seated on the couch. Naomi and I were sitting in the studio area face to face with microphones. And the stories that she told, Andrew, about what her life was like before anybody knew her name, when she was so poor, she didn't have the money to go to the laundromat, which was called the Wishy-Washy. She had an old-fashioned Ringer washing machine. And on a Saturday night or a Sunday night, they would listen to the Grand Ole Opry and pop popcorn. But at one point, she was telling the story of a very abusive relationship that she had been in, and how she had to run out of an apartment with Ashley and Winona in tow and run to the police. And the children were covered with blood from her bloody face. And her husband, Larry, started to cry. And he was sitting over on the couch. And it occurred to both Jacy and me that we're part of stories that if we just ask a respectful, open-ended question and the person starts to share their life with us. Naomi's husband didn't even know this story. And I'll never forget, she stopped and she looked at him and she goes, "What's the matter with you?" And he goes, "You're breaking my heart over here." You know, we're part of this now. And they're sharing their lives with us. And that's pretty memorable.
Well, Candy and Jacy, we have had a ball with y'all on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell our viewers how they can find out more about country music success stories.
Absolutely. Well, we just launched our brand new website, which is countrymusicsuccessstories.com. So you can go over there for all the information that you could ever want about our show. You can also download and listen on every single podcasting platform, Apple, Spotify, every place. CandyOterry.com/podcast. You can also listen to every single episode there. And we also have all of our information on social media at Country Music Success Stories on Facebook and Instagram. And
don't forget Music City Mentor, which is the special feature that Jacy has inside of our show, where she takes as a lifting off point some of the wonderful advice that we've received from these artists and tells young artists, gives them a tip sheet, free tip sheet, and gives them some really great advice as the Music City Mentor. And you can watch her on YouTube. Did I do okay with that?
You did great.
That is amazing. She needs to hire you as her advertising manager. You'd have it going.
Yes,
that's for sure.
Well, thank you both so much. I have enjoyed it, and I really appreciate what y'all do, and y'all are amazing. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
you are a wonderful
You're
interviewer.
amazing.
Honestly, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good day.
You too.